Well, as the UK government is continuing to offer support to foreign-backed insurgents in Syria, British people are becoming wary of entering yet another conflict in a Muslim country. According to a survey by Comrades for the independent newspaper, Brits don't believe that their country should provide military supplies to Syrian militant groups. The huge margin of 48% against to 35% in favour of further support is showing how much the British fear another conflict. So far, Prime Minister David Cameron has been trying to rally support among European leaders to further fund insurgents. This all comes at a time when the British economy is flagging and doesn't seem to be improving. Well, to discuss that story a bit further, we're now joined with Mr. Chris Bambery, who is a political commentator who is joining us now on the line from London. Mr. Bambery, thanks a lot for joining us now. Does it really matter to the British government how British citizens themselves feel? Of course, we've seen in the past, as far as wars go in Afghanistan and Iraq, that the government pretty much sidelined the people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there was opposition, massive opposition to the war in Iraq in 2003. Yet the British government went ahead, trailing behind the Americans. There is opposition to the war in Afghanistan. Every opinion poll shows there is opposition to the presence of British troops there, and there's opposition to the intervention in Libya. But I think it is worrying for the British, because the British government has taken the lead in demand, along with the French, in this call for Western intervention in Syria. And I think the British public are quite cynical about this. They remember that the lies they were told about Iraq, that Iraq had missiles which could hit Britain within 45 minutes, which was a load of rubbish. And then we heard stories, for instance, that the Assad regime in Syria was about to use chemical weapons. It revives memories of those lies. And I think people are very cynical about what they're being told about this. And the majority of people, I think, are quite right to look at what's happening in Syria and think, why should Britain become involved in this? Why should we support the rebels? What's in it for us? You also mentioned something else which I think is important, that there's a difference in what took place in Iraq and even Afghanistan over a decade ago and now. Britain is now in a serious recession. People's living standards are falling. Public services are being cut. And therefore people are asking, well, why is it there's no money for this, there's no money for education, there's no money for hospitals? But there does seem to be money for a fresh war. There always seems to be money for war. There always seems to be money for Britain's adventures in support of America, but not for services we need. So I think all of that adds to opposition to the war. And I think it does create problems for the Cameron government, because the Cameron government is itself unpopular because of the austerity measures and cuts. So altogether, I think there are some differences between Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, the economy and the unpopularity of the government make it a different situation.
So then, Mr. Bambery, are you then saying in a sense that what people feel will matter to Cameron at this point?
I think it does matter to Cameron, precisely because he is an embattled Prime Minister. He's under siege because of the austerity. I mean, on his New Year's message to the British people was essentially that austerity is going to continue for as long as foreseeable, and there is no immediate hope of an economic turnaround and end to the recession. And in that situation, he looks across Europe and sees that every sitting government in Europe has lost the election in every recent poll. And therefore, I think he'll be very wary of directly putting British troops into Syria. That does not mean that indirectly they will continue to do what they're doing. That Britain has already got a presence in Syria. Special forces are operating in Syria. They are training the rebel forces. They're providing arms along with America, France, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So there is British intervention going on, but if you like, it's covert British intervention. I think that moving on up into direct intervention is quite a gamble for an unpopular government and an unpopular Prime Minister.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now. That was Mr. Chris Bambery, political commentator, speaking to us live on the line from London. Mr. Bambery, as always, we do appreciate your insight here on Press TV.